During the Second World War, an American bomber crew decided to name their plane Princess Elizabeth after the future Queen of England. It seemed like a good idea too, until someone asked, what if it gets shot down? By July of 1944, the tide was finally turning against Nazi Germany. The Allies had landed in Normandy on D-Day. The beachhead was just barely secure, and the fight to drive the Germans back and liberate Paris was about to begin. England was home to the many American bomb groups of the 8th Air Force. Most of the Americans were just 18 or 19 years old and had never left their homes, let alone visited Europe. Yet they were overseas at air bases the size of small American towns. What had before been farmlands had been paved with runways. Hangars were erected, control towers were put in place, mess halls were set up. There were officers' clubs and NCO clubs, and row after row of Quonset huts, with dirt streets marked out on the ground. As the eldest daughter of King George VI, Princess Elizabeth of York, the future Queen of England, felt a special duty to visit each air group personally. At each airbase visit, the American group commander would assemble the men in long rows to greet her, and for the Americans, the thought of meeting a real princess seemed an impossible thing. To a man, they found her gracious, welcoming, and always with a kind word. Her visits would be remembered for the rest of their lives. When she planned to come to the 306th Bomb Group at Thurley, one of the B-17 crews assigned to the 367th Bombardment Squadron decided to do something special for her in return. They elected to name their plane in her honor, so just below and in front of the cockpit, they painted the name Princess Elizabeth along with a finely detailed rose. Applying nose art on airplanes was a popular practice among the men, though usually it wasn't that suitable for a princess. It was pictures of beautiful, often scantily clad young ladies. Still, some of the B-17s at Thurley featured nose art that was less risque, so why not Princess Elizabeth? The crew chief, Master Sergeant Edward S. Gregory, had thought that just as ships were christened, so too should be his B-17. So he drafted a formal request to Windsor Castle and invited the princess to break a bottle of champagne over the plane's nose. The problem was, everyone knew it took a lot of luck to survive a tour of duty in a bomber. The odds of getting shot down, taken prisoner, or killed were about 5% on every mission they flew. In 1944, a full tour of duty was 25 missions, so most of the bombers didn't make much more than a dozen flights before they were lost. As a result, among the airmen, superstitions ran high. Some carried rabbit's feet, others wound a lucky rubber band around their wrist. As for the aircrew of Captain Perry E. Raster, they thought there was no better charm than naming the plane after Princess Elizabeth herself, if only she would agree to it. The problem was, if the bomber was shot down and the Germans recovered even a single twisted fragment of it, it would have been a propaganda victory for them. Yet Princess Elizabeth disagreed. She understood perfectly well what it meant to the men to name their plane in her honor. A compromise was offered by King George, who asked that the name Princess Elizabeth be painted over and replaced with a title that was hers and hers alone. The plane was to be called the Rose of York. She wrote back that she agreed to christen the plane and would do so personally on July 6, 1944. Naturally, it turned into a major press event. Her father, King George, came along, and on the American side, General Jimmy Doolittle led the welcoming delegation. When they arrived, 54 B-17 Flying Fortresses flew overhead to greet them. The band played God Save the King, and a bouquet of flowers was given to Princess Elizabeth. She walked through the ranks of thousands of men who had assembled to greet her, smiling and waving. She spent most of the time talking with the crew chief, Master Sergeant Gregory. He was from Salt Lake City, Utah, and it was his idea to name the plane after her. A minor wrinkle in the plan was that nobody could find a bottle of champagne. A flask of English cider was purchased from a local pub, however, and the crew suspended it on a short rope just in front of the airplane. The princess walked forward, said a few words, then shattered the cider bottle on the nose turret. The afternoon ended with a meal at the officers' mess hall. When it was time to depart, the base kitchen staff presented the royal family with a rare treat for wartime England. They gave her a thermos of fresh ice cream. The following day, the Rose of York flew a mission to Leipzig and bombed a German fighter plane factory. After that, the plane successfully completed more missions than most bombers ever did. That plane saw its original crew through the end of its tour. Then another crew was assigned. They made it too. Then a third crew. Ultimately, the Rose of York proved to be a lucky ship. It flew a total of 63 missions, and finally, its luck ran out on February 3, 1945, after bombing Berlin. 3 of the squadron's 9 planes assigned to the mission that day were hit. 1 lost a wing over Berlin, and only 4 parachutes were counted. Another, despite an engine hit, made it to Sweden. Lieutenant Werner F. Daly's crew was on the Rose of York when they too took a hit. With an engine out and fuel streaming behind the plane, they lagged behind. 2/3 of the way across the English Channel, the bomb squadron heard its last radio communication from the crew. They said they were still hoping to make it back to England. 10 men disappeared that day, including a BBC News correspondent named Guy Byam. Even in its loss, the Rose of York denied the Germans a propaganda victory. No piece of the plane was ever found. The crew on the Rose of York that day was the plane's third, led by Lieutenant Werner F. Daly. It was his 23rd mission. They were just 2 missions short of finishing a tour and going home. To this day, they're listed as missing in action, presumed deceased. The unexpectedly long service in war of the Rose of York reminds us of the Queen's own words when she said, "I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service." The story of the Rose of York is dedicated to Queen Elizabeth. She will be greatly missed. I'm Thomas Van Hare, and this is Historic Wings. Please subscribe and click like. And remember, there's always more to the story.